Every year, thousands of people vanish on lonely highways, some never to be seen again. Imagine you're driving at night, headlights slicing through the darkness, when a lone figure appears at the roadside, thumb out, face hidden in shadow. You slow down, heart pounding, torn between fear and curiosity. What would you do? Across the world, real people have faced this moment. And for some, it ended in ways more chilling than any movie. These aren't urban legends or campfire tales. These are true stories, each more disturbing than the last, and they could happen to anyone. Tonight, Verified Fears takes you deep into the heart of the unknown, with 11 disturbing true hitchhiking horror stories. Each one a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones waiting for a ride. If you think you're brave enough to handle the truth, hit subscribe now and join the Verified Fears community. Because after these stories, you'll never look at an empty road the same way again. Let's move to our first story. The diner was nearly empty, save for the hum of neon and the low crackle of a radio behind the counter. It was one of those places that seemed to exist outside of time. A way station for lost souls and long-haul truckers. The kind of spot where stories stuck to the walls like old grease. Rain battered the windows in relentless sheets, turning the parking lot into a mirror of headlights and shadows. It was just after midnight when Caleb stumbled in, soaked to the bone and clutching a battered backpack. He looked barely 20, all nerves and exhaustion, the kind of kid who'd say yes to a ride from a stranger because the alternative was sleeping under an overpass. He slid into a booth, shivering, and ordered coffee with shaking hands. Across the room, a man in a faded trucker's cap watched him. The man's name was Roy, though Caleb wouldn't learn that until later. Roy was broad-shouldered, with a face that looked carved from old leather and eyes that missed nothing. He'd been on the road since dusk, hauling freight from Amarillo to Tulsa, and he'd seen enough to know when someone was running from something. After a while, Roy got up and sat across from Caleb. He didn't smile. He just nodded at the kid's coffee, then at the rain outside. "Rough night to be hitchhiking," Roy said, his voice low and even. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Guess I didn't plan it too well." Roy studied him for a moment, and then leaned in, elbows on the table. "You ever hear the story of the night rider?" Caleb shook his head, trying to play it cool, but Roy could see the fear in his eyes. The kind that comes from more than just a bad night. "Figured not," Roy said. "Most folks haven't. But you're out here on these roads. You ought to know what you're getting into." He paused, letting the silence stretch, the rain filling the gaps. "See, not every hitchhiker wants a ride. Some want revenge." Caleb tried to laugh it off, but Roy's gaze pinned him in place. "You think I'm joking? I ain't. Let me tell you how it started." Roy's story began decades ago, back when the highways were even lonelier and the rules of the road were written in blood. There was a man. No one remembers his real name, just that he drove a black Chevy with a busted taillight. He picked up hitchhikers, always late at night, always on the stretch of Route 82 that runs through the Badlands. One night, he picked up a girl in a red jacket. She was quiet, polite, barely spoke above a whisper. No one knows what happened in that car. But the next morning, the Chevy was found abandoned in a ditch, the windshield shattered, the seats soaked in blood. The girl was never found, neither was the driver. After that, people started seeing things on Route 82. Drivers would spot a figure in a red jacket standing by the roadside, thumb out, face hidden by her hair. Some said she was a ghost, others said she was something worse. But everyone agreed on one thing. If you stopped for her, you never made it to your destination. Caleb listened, half believing, half terrified. Roy's voice was hypnotic, drawing him in, making the diner's lights seem dimmer, the rain louder. "I picked her up once," Roy said quietly. "Years ago. I was young, stupid, thought I was invincible. Saw her standing there, shivering in the rain. She looked harmless. So I pulled over." He described the way she slid into the passenger seat, silent and dripping, her eyes hidden beneath a curtain of wet hair. She didn't speak, didn't even look at him. Roy tried to make small talk, but she just stared out the window, her hands clenched in her lap. After a few miles, Roy realized the radio was dead. The headlights flickered. The air in the cab grew cold, colder than the rain outside. He glanced over, and for a split second, he saw her face. Pale, hollow-eyed, lips twisted in a silent scream. He slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop, and when he looked again, she was gone. The passenger door was still locked. The seat was soaked, but there was no sign of her. Roy drove the rest of the night without stopping. He never picked up another hitchhiker. Back in the diner, Roy leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You think I'm crazy, kid? Maybe I am. But I've seen things on these roads that'd turn your hair white. You keep hitchhiking, you're gonna meet someone like her. Maybe not a ghost, maybe just a person with nothing left to lose. That's scarier, if you ask me." He looked Caleb in the eye, and for the first time, the kid saw real fear there, a memory that wouldn't fade. "Promise me something," Roy said. "Next time you're out there and you see someone who doesn't belong, someone who makes the hair on your neck stand up, you keep walking. Don't get in the car. Don't let them in yours. Some rides you don't come back from." Caleb nodded, swallowing hard. The rain had eased, but the world outside the diner felt darker, the shadows deeper. Caleb never saw Roy again. He finished his coffee, left a few crumpled bills on the table, and walked out into the night. He kept walking, even when a pickup slowed down and offered him a ride. He remembered Roy's eyes, the weight of his words. Years later, Caleb would tell the story to others, at bars, at bus stations, wherever lost souls gathered. He'd add his own details, make it his own, but the core never changed. Not every hitchhiker wants a ride. Some want revenge. Sometimes, late at night, when the road was empty and the wind howled through the trees, Caleb would see her. A flash of red at the edge of his vision, a pale face in the rearview mirror. He'd drive faster, heart pounding, praying he'd make it to sunrise. He never picked up another hitchhiker. Some say the night rider's story is just a cautionary tale, a way to keep kids from trusting strangers. But every year, people vanish on lonely highways, their cars found abandoned, their fates unknown. Police chalk it up to accidents, runaways, bad luck. But the truckers and drifters, the ones who live on the road, they know better. They say you can still see her on Route 82, waiting for a ride that never comes. And if you're unlucky enough to stop, you'll join her. Another ghost on the highway, another secret the night keeps. So next time you're driving alone and you see a figure by the roadside, think twice before you slow down. Some rides you don't come back from, and that's the night rider's secret. Let's move to our second story. It was the kind of August night that pressed in from all sides. Humid, airless, the sky a bruise of purple and black. For most people, it was a night to stay inside, windows closed, fans humming. But for Lena, it was just another shift behind the wheel, another 100 miles to go before she could rest. She'd been driving rideshare for nearly 2 years, picking up fares in every corner of the state, and she'd seen it all. Drunks, runaways, couples fighting in the back seat, even a woman who gave birth on the way to the hospital. But nothing prepared her for the night she met the silent passenger. Lena was a practical woman, not given to flights of fancy. She kept her car clean, her mind sharp, and her doors locked. She knew the risks. Her mother reminded her every time they spoke. Her friends sent her news stories about drivers who went missing, who picked up the wrong person at the wrong time. But Lena needed the money, and she liked the freedom of the road. She liked the way the city changed after midnight, how the world felt different when most people were asleep. It was just after 1:30 a.m. when she got the ping. A pickup at the edge of town, near the old industrial park. She hesitated. She hated that part of the city, all empty warehouses and broken streetlights. But the fare was good, and she was already headed in that direction. She tapped accept and turned onto the service road, her headlights cutting through the darkness. The passenger was waiting by the curb, standing perfectly still beneath a flickering street lamp. He was tall, thin, dressed in a dark suit that looked out of place in the heat. He held a small black suitcase in one hand, his other hand tucked into his pocket. Lena slowed to a stop, rolled down the window. "You call for a ride?" she asked. He nodded once. His face was pale, almost gray, his eyes dark and unreadable. He didn't smile, didn't speak. Lena felt a prickle of unease, but she unlocked the doors anyway. He slid into the back seat, set the suitcase beside him, and buckled his seatbelt in one smooth motion. "Where to?" Lena asked, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. He didn't answer. She checked the app. No destination entered. Just a blank screen, the passenger's name listed as M. "Do you have an address?" She tried again. He met her eyes in the mirror, and for a moment, Lena felt as if she were looking at a photograph, not a person. His gaze was flat, expressionless, as if he were waiting for her to make a mistake. She cleared her throat. "I can't start the ride without a destination." He lifted a finger and pointed straight ahead, down the empty road. Lena hesitated, then put the car in drive. She'd had silent passengers before. People too drunk or tired to talk. People who just wanted to be left alone. She told herself this was no different. But as she pulled away from the curb, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The city fell away behind them, replaced by fields and forests, the road narrowing to a 2-lane strip of asphalt. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of insects outside. Lena tried the radio, but all she got was static. She glanced in the mirror. Her passenger hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just sat there with his hands folded in his lap. After a few miles, Lena tried again. "You sure you don't want to tell me where we're going?" No response. He didn't even blink. She forced a laugh, trying to break the tension. "You know, most people at least say hello." Nothing. The silence grew heavier, pressing in on her chest. Lena found herself gripping the wheel tighter, her knuckles white. She tried to focus on the road, but her eyes kept drifting to the mirror, to the pale face in the back seat. She drove for what felt like hours. the road winding through endless darkness. Every so often she'd pass a sign, names she didn't recognize, towns she'd never heard of. The app still showed no destination, no route, just a blinking dot moving through empty space. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She pulled over to the side of the road, put the car in park, and turned to face her passenger. "Look, I need an address. I can't just keep driving all night." He stared at her, unblinking. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to get out if you don't tell me where to go." Still nothing. She reached for her phone, thinking she'd call the rideshare company, maybe even the police. But her phone was dead. No signal, no battery, nothing. She cursed under her breath, tried the radio again, still static. She turned back to the passenger, her patience gone. "I don't know what your deal is, but..." He lifted the suitcase onto his lap and opened it slowly. Lena watched, heart pounding, half expecting a weapon, a wad of cash, something dangerous or illegal. But inside the suitcase was nothing. Just an empty, black void, deeper than it should have been, as if the case had no bottom. Lena blinked, certain she was seeing things. The passenger looked up, met her eyes, and for the first time, he spoke. "Drive." His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it filled the car, echoing in Lena's bones. She put the car in drive, hands shaking, and pulled back onto the road. They drove in silence for miles, the world outside growing stranger with every passing minute. The trees seemed to lean closer to the road, their branches clawing at the windows. The sky was darker than before, the stars gone, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. Lena's mind raced. She thought about pulling over again, about jumping out and running. But something kept her in her seat. A sense of inevitability, as if she were caught in a current she couldn't escape. The passenger never took his eyes off her, never blinked, never moved. The suitcase sat open on his lap, the void inside it swallowing the light. After what felt like hours, they reached a crossroads. The passenger pointed to the left, and Lena turned without thinking. The road narrowed, the trees pressed in, and the air grew colder. Finally, they reached a clearing, a wide, empty field. The grass flattened as if something massive had passed through. The passenger tapped her shoulder, and Lena stopped the car. He got out, taking the suitcase with him. He stood in the field for a moment, staring up at the sky, then turned and looked back at Lena. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer now, almost human. Lena watched as he walked into the field, the suitcase swinging at his side. She waited, breath held, until he vanished into the darkness. She sat there for a long time, unable to move, her mind racing. When she finally turned the car around and headed back the way she'd come, she realized she didn't recognize the road. The signs were gone, the landmarks unfamiliar. She drove for what felt like hours, the sky growing lighter, the world returning to normal. When she finally reached the city, the sun was rising. She checked her phone, full battery, full signal, as if nothing had happened. The app showed her last ride as completed, the fare paid in full. No record of the passenger, no destination listed. Lena tried to tell herself it was a dream, a trick of the mind brought on by exhaustion. But she couldn't shake the memory of the suitcase, the bottomless void inside it, the way the passenger's eyes had looked. Empty, endless, hungry. She quit driving rideshare that day. Sold her car, moved to a new city, started over. But sometimes, late at night, she'd wake up with the memory of that voice in her ear, soft and insistent. Drive. She never picked up another stranger. She never took another ride at night. And she never, ever drove down that road again. But the story followed her, whispered in the corners of her mind, a reminder that some passengers are better left behind, that some roads lead to places you can't come back from, and that the silent passenger is still out there, waiting for his next ride. Let's move to our third story. The first message arrived at 2:13 a.m., a simple text. "You up?" It was from Jamie, and at first, Erin thought nothing of it. Jamie was always impulsive, always out late, always chasing the next thrill. But when Erin replied, "Yeah, what's up?" there was no answer. She shrugged it off, rolled over, and tried to sleep. But her phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail. The notification startled her. Jamie never left voicemails. She pressed play, expecting to hear laughter, maybe music in the background. Instead, she heard only Jamie's shaky breath and a whisper. "Erin, I think I made a mistake. I'll call you soon." It was the last time Erin heard Jamie's voice. Jamie had always been restless. She was the kind of friend who'd drag you out of bed at midnight to drive to the beach, who'd jump into a stranger's car just to see where the road would take her. Erin admired her courage, but worried about her recklessness. That Friday, Jamie had texted her a dozen times. "Let's go somewhere. Let's do something wild." Road trip? But Erin had a deadline, a stack of work, and begged off. Jamie didn't push. Instead, she sent one last message. "No worries. I'll find my own adventure." Erin didn't know what that meant until the police called the next morning. Jamie's mother was frantic. She hadn't come home, hadn't answered calls, hadn't posted on social media. Erin tried to retrace her friend's steps, but there was nothing. No Instagram stories, no Snapchats, just that single voicemail and a string of unread texts. The police weren't much help. "She's an adult," they said. "Maybe she just needed space." Erin knew better. Jamie might have been impulsive, but she always checked in. Always. So Erin did what Jamie would have done. She started digging. She scrolled through Jamie's social feeds, looking for anything unusual. There was a photo posted at 11:47 p.m. A blurry shot of an empty highway, headlights stretching into the dark. The caption read, "On the road again. Adyashu hitchhiking Saryashu adventure." Erin's heart pounded. She zoomed in, searching for clues. In the corner, barely visible, was the outline of a figure standing by the roadside. Erin didn't recognize them, but something about the posture, rigid, expectant, made her uneasy. She checked the comments. Most were jokes. "Be careful. Don't get murdered, LOL. Text me when you get there." But there was one comment that stood out, posted by a user with no profile picture. "See you soon." The next day, Erin received another voicemail. This one was different. Distorted, full of static. Jamie's voice was barely audible. "Erin, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. The guy, he's not who he says he is. If you get this, please." The message cut off, replaced by a burst of white noise. Erin replayed it over and over, trying to make sense of the background sounds. Was that wind? A train? Someone else's voice? She called the number Jamie had used, but it went straight to voicemail. She texted, begged for a response, but nothing came. 5. The search. Erin couldn't sit still. She drove to the last place Jamie's phone had pinged, a gas station on the outskirts of town. The attendant remembered her. Yeah, she was here. Bought coffee, asked about a ride to the next city, said she was meeting someone. Who? Erin pressed. The attendant shrugged. Didn't say. Just that she was waiting for a friend. Erin checked the security footage. Jamie appeared on the grainy screen, pacing outside, glancing at her phone. Then a car pulled up. A battered sedan, windows tinted, license plate obscured by mud. Jamie hesitated, then got in. The car drove off into the night. Erin began to receive a series of texts, always from Jamie's number, always late at night. He's taking a shortcut. Road's getting weird. No signs, just trees. I don't think this is the way to the city. Each message grew shorter, more frantic. He won't talk to me. No service. Can you see my location? I'm scared. Erin replied to each one, desperate, but there was never an answer. The final message arrived at 3:07 a.m. He says we're almost there. Attached was a photo, a blurry shot of the dashboard, the speedometer needle hovering at 0, the headlights illuminating a stretch of road that seemed to go on forever. In the passenger seat, Jamie's reflection appeared in the window, eyes wide with fear. Behind her, in the darkness, was the faint outline of another face. Erin took the photo to the police. They dismissed it as a trick of the light, a glitch. But Erin knew better. She started researching, scouring forums and message boards for stories of hitchhikers gone missing. She found dozens. People who'd vanished after accepting rides from strangers whose last messages were always the same. The road doesn't end. I can't get out. He's still driving. Some called it the vanishing point, a stretch of highway that didn't exist on any map, a place where the rules of reality broke down. Those who entered never returned. One night, Erin received a call. The number was blocked, the voice distorted. Erin, it whispered. Don't look for me. You'll only get lost. She recognized Jamie's voice, but there was something else beneath it. A second voice, deeper, echoing her words. Some roads don't lead anywhere, it said. Some rides never end. The line went dead. Erin never stopped searching. She drove the highways at night, retracing Jamie's route, stopping at every gas station, every diner, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Sometimes, she'd see a figure by the roadside. A girl with wild hair, thumb out, eyes pleading. Erin would slow down, heart pounding. But when she looked again, the figure was gone. She started receiving voicemails from unknown numbers. Each one was the same, static, a whisper, Jamie's voice calling her name. Months passed. Erin's friends begged her to move on, but she couldn't. Jamie was out there, somewhere, trapped on a road that never ended. One night, Erin's phone buzzed. A new message from Jamie's number. I'm here. Attached was a photo, this time of Erin herself. Standing by the roadside, thumb out, headlights approaching. Erin stared at the image, heart racing. She hadn't been there. She hadn't taken that photo. The phone rang. She answered, hands shaking. Erin, Jamie's voice whispered. It's your turn." Aaron understood then. The vanishing point wasn't a place. It was a cycle, a curse passed from one hitchhiker to the next. The only way out was to bring someone else in. She deleted the messages, blocked the number, tried to forget. But the road called to her, whispering promises of answers, of closure. She started driving at night, windows down, searching for something she couldn't name. The last voicemail arrived at dawn. Somewhere out there, the road never ends. Somewhere, Jamie is still waiting for a ride home. And somewhere, another driver is slowing down, rolling down the window, asking, "Where to?" Erin listened to the message over and over, the words burning into her mind. She never found Jamie. But sometimes, late at night, she'd catch a glimpse of her friend in the rearview mirror, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. And she knew. The vanishing point was real. People still talk about Jamie, about the girl who vanished on a midnight highway. Some say she's still out there, thumbing rides, waiting for someone to take her home. Others say she's become part of the road itself, a warning to those who travel alone. But Aaron knows the truth. The vanishing point isn't a place on a map. It's a moment, a decision, a glance, a ride you wish you'd never taken. And if you ever get a text in the middle of the night, a whisper in the darkness, think twice before you answer. Because some roads never let you go, and some passengers are never meant to arrive. Let's move to our fourth story. Maya always believed that kindness was a currency, one you spent freely, trusting it would come back to you when you needed it most. She'd been raised in a family that left casseroles on neighbors' doorsteps, that stopped for every stray dog, that never passed a hitchhiker without at least considering a ride. Even after moving to the city, Maya kept that faith alive. Though her friends called her reckless, naive, even foolish, she'd laugh it off, saying, "I'd rather regret helping someone than regret not helping at all." It was a philosophy that had never failed her, until the night she met the girl in the yellow raincoat. It was a Thursday, late spring, and the rain had been falling for hours, turning the city's streets into rivers. Maya was driving home from her shift at the bookstore, exhausted and half listening to a true crime podcast. The city was nearly empty at that hour. Just the glow of traffic lights reflected in puddles and the distant wail of sirens. As she turned onto the old highway that led out of town, her headlights caught a figure standing at the edge of the road, thumb out, hair plastered to her face by the rain. Maya slowed instinctively, rolling down her window. The girl looked young, maybe 19, maybe younger. Her face pale and anxious, her yellow raincoat far too thin for the weather. She clutched a battered backpack to her chest. "Are you okay?" Maya called, voice raised over the rain. The girl nodded, shivering. "Can you give me a ride? Just to the next town, please." Maya hesitated. She remembered every warning, every horror story, every time her mother had begged her not to pick up strangers. But the girl looked so small, so desperate, and the rain was so relentless. Maya unlocked the doors. The girl slid into the passenger seat, water pooling at her feet. She gave her name as Riley, thanked Maya over and over, and asked if she could warm her hands on the vents. Maya nodded, trying to make conversation. But Riley was quiet, her answers clipped, her gaze fixed on the windshield. As they drove, Maya tried to shake off the unease that crept over her. She asked Riley where she was headed, if she had family waiting. Riley answered in vague terms. An aunt in the next town, a job interview, a phone that had died hours ago. She seemed grateful, but distant, her eyes darting to the side mirror every few minutes. The rain grew heavier, drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. The highway was empty, the world reduced to the tunnel of Maya's headlights. She glanced at Riley, trying to read her expression, but the girl's face was hidden by her hair. After a few miles, Riley spoke. "Can we take the old road? The one through the woods? It's faster, and I don't want my aunt to worry." Maya hesitated. The old road was notorious, a winding stretch of asphalt that twisted through dense forest, barely wide enough for 2 cars. It was the kind of road you avoided at night, especially in the rain. But Riley's voice was pleading, and Maya didn't want to seem suspicious or rude. "Sure," she said, forcing a smile. "If you're sure it's safe." Riley nodded, her relief palpable. Maya turned off the main highway, tires hissing on the wet pavement, and entered the woods. The trees closed in, branches scraping the roof, the darkness pressing at the windows. They drove in silence for a while, the only sound the rain and the occasional crackle of static from the radio. Maya's nerves were stretched thin, every shadow on the roadside a potential threat. She tried to make small talk, but Riley's answers grew shorter, her posture more rigid. Suddenly, Riley's phone buzzed. She fumbled it from her backpack, glancing at the screen. Maya caught a glimpse of a message, just a single word. "Ready?" Riley's hand shook as she typed a reply, then tucked the phone away. Maya's heart pounded. She tried to focus on the road, but her mind raced with possibilities. Was Riley in trouble? Was someone waiting for her? Was Maya about to become the headline of a story she'd once listened to on her drive home? A few minutes later, Riley asked Maya to pull over at a small clearing. "My aunt's house is just down this path," she said, pointing into the darkness. "Thank you for the ride, really." Maya hesitated. "Are you sure you'll be okay? I can wait until you're inside." Riley shook her head. "No, it's fine. You've done enough. Thank you." She opened the door and stepped into the rain, pausing for a moment to look back at Maya. "You're a good person," she said softly. "I'm sorry." Before Maya could ask what she meant, Riley disappeared into the trees. Maya sat in the car, engine idling, trying to calm her nerves. She told herself she'd done the right thing, that Riley was safe now, that she could go home and forget about the strange encounter. But as she reached for her phone to check the time, she heard a noise. A sharp, metallic tap on the driver's side window. She turned, heart in her throat. A man stood outside, face obscured by the rain and the darkness. He motioned for her to roll down the window. Maya's instincts screamed at her to drive, but she hesitated, just long enough for the man to yank open the door. He grabbed her arm, pulling her from the car, his grip iron strong. Maya struggled, kicking and clawing. But another figure emerged from the trees, a second man, taller, broader, face hidden by a hood. They dragged her into the woods, ignoring her screams, her pleas. Maya fought with everything she had. But the rain muffled her cries, the trees swallowing the sound. They brought her to the clearing where Riley stood, her yellow raincoat glowing in the darkness. The girl's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and something else. Guilt, maybe, or resignation. "I'm sorry," Riley whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They said they'd hurt me if I didn't help. I didn't want to. The men ignored her, focusing on Maya. They rifled through her pockets, taking her wallet, her phone, her keys. One of them smashed her phone on a rock, scattering pieces into the mud. Maya begged them to let her go, promising not to call the police, not to tell anyone. The men laughed, their voices cold and empty. They tied her hands, blindfolded her, and left her lying in the wet grass, the rain soaking through her clothes. For what felt like hours, Maya lay there, listening to the sound of footsteps, voices, the distant roar of a car engine. She thought of her family, her friends, all the times she'd been warned not to trust strangers. She wondered if anyone would find her, if anyone would even know where to look. Eventually, the footsteps faded. The voices disappeared. Maya waited, counting her breaths, until she was sure she was alone. She worked the blindfold loose, then the knots on her wrists, her fingers numb and clumsy. When she finally staggered back to the road, her car was gone. She walked for miles, stumbling through the rain, until she reached a farmhouse. The woman who answered the door took one look at Maya and called the police. The investigation dragged on for weeks. The police found Maya's car abandoned in a ditch, stripped of anything valuable. Riley and the two men vanished without a trace. The only clue was a message left on Maya's voicemail, sent from her own phone. "Thank you for your kindness. I'm sorry." Maya's friends said she was lucky to be alive. They told her she'd done nothing wrong, that she couldn't have known. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been targeted, chosen not for her weakness, but for her kindness. She stopped picking up hitchhikers after that. She stopped stopping for anyone, no matter how desperate they looked. She locked her doors, kept her windows up, and drove with the radio off, listening for the sound of footsteps in the rain. Sometimes, late at night, Maya would see a girl in a yellow raincoat standing by the side of the road, thumb out, eyes pleading. And every time, Maya kept driving, her heart heavy with regret. Because kindness, she learned, is a currency, and sometimes the price is far higher than you ever imagined. Let's move to our fifth story. The night was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel heavier. Alex was driving west, the highway stretching endlessly ahead, headlights carving tunnels through the dark. He'd been on the road for hours, escaping a city that felt more suffocating with each passing day. He wasn't sure where he was headed, just away. Away from the job that drained him, the apartment that felt like a cage, the friends who'd stopped calling. The open road was his only companion, the steady hum of tires on asphalt a lullaby for his restless mind. It was just past midnight when Alex saw him, a lone figure standing by the shoulder, illuminated in the high beams. The man was tall, gaunt, wrapped in a threadbare coat despite the summer heat. He held a cardboard sign that read simply, "Anywhere." Something about the man's posture, the way he stood perfectly still, as if waiting for Alex specifically, sent a shiver down his spine. But Alex was tired, and the loneliness gnawed at him. Against his better judgment, he slowed and rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" Alex called. The man nodded, his face shadowed beneath the brim of a battered hat. "Thank you," he said, voice soft, almost melodic. "I'm headed west, if that's where you're going." Alex hesitated, then unlocked the doors. The man slid into the passenger seat, folding his long limbs with unnatural grace. Up close, Alex noticed the man's eyes, pale, almost colorless, with a depth that made Alex feel exposed. They drove in silence for a while. the only sound the drone of the engine and the occasional chirp of cicadas outside. Alex tried to make conversation, asking the usual questions. "Where are you from? Where are you headed?" The man answered in riddles, never giving a straight response. "I go where I'm needed," he said at one point, staring out the window. "The road tells me where to stop." Alex laughed nervously. "And what does the road say tonight?" The man turned, his gaze piercing. "Tonight it says you need to listen." Alex felt a chill, but he forced a smile. "Listen to what?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, battered notebook. He flipped it open and began to write, the scratch of pen on the paper loud in the quiet car. Alex watched him out of the corner of his eye, curiosity warring with unease. "What are you writing?" The man smiled, lips thin and pale. "Predictions," he said. "Things that haven't happened yet." Alex laughed again, trying to shake off the discomfort. "Like a fortune teller?" "Something like that," the man replied. "But I don't tell fortunes. I tell truths." They drove on, the miles slipping away beneath the wheels. The man would occasionally mutter to himself, scribbling in his notebook, eyes flicking up to study Alex's face. The air in the car grew heavier, charged with something Alex couldn't name. After a while, the man spoke again. "You're running from something." Alex stiffened. "Aren't we all?" The man nodded, as if satisfied. "But you can't outrun yourself. No matter how far you drive, you'll find yourself waiting at the next stop." Alex bristled. "What's that supposed to mean?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he tore a page from his notebook and handed it to Alex. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant. It read, "You will see the sign at the crossroads. When you do, choose carefully. Not every path leads home." Alex frowned. "What sign?" The man just smiled, folding his hands in his lap. They drove on, the road narrowing as they entered a stretch of dense forest. The trees pressed close on either side, their branches arching overhead like skeletal fingers. The headlights caught shapes in the darkness. Deer, maybe, or something else. Alex's nerves were frayed, his hands slick on the wheel. After a few miles, they reached a crossroads. A battered wooden sign stood at the intersection, its paint faded and peeling. It read, "Turn back while you can." Alex's heart pounded. He glanced at the man, who watched him with those pale, unreadable eyes. "This is it," the man said softly. "The choice." Alex hesitated. The road to the left looked well-traveled, its surface smooth and inviting. The road to the right was overgrown, barely more than a trail, swallowed by darkness. "Which way?" Alex asked, voice barely above a whisper. The man shrugged. "That's not for me to say. Only you can choose." Alex stared at the sign, the words burning into his mind. He thought of his life back in the city, the job he hated, the friends he'd lost, the dreams he'd abandoned. He thought of the open road, the promise of something new, something better. He turned left, choosing the well-traveled road. The man nodded, as if he'd expected it. They drove in silence for a while, the tension in the car thick enough to choke on. Alex tried to shake off the unease, but the man's presence was oppressive, his gaze unblinking. Finally, Alex couldn't take it anymore. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What do you want from me?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm just a passenger. You invited me in." Alex gripped the wheel tighter. "I think you should get out." The man nodded. "As you wish." He opened the door and stepped out, vanishing into the darkness without a backward glance. Alex watched him go, relief flooding through him. He drove on, the road growing narrower, the trees pressing closer. The air grew colder, the darkness deeper. Alex's headlights flickered, then died, plunging him into blackness. He tried to start the car, but the engine wouldn't turn over. Panic rose in his chest. He fumbled for his phone, but there was no signal, no light, nothing but the sound of his own ragged breathing. He sat there for what felt like hours, the darkness pressing in, the silence absolute. He thought of the sign, the man's words, the choice he'd made. Finally, he saw headlights in the distance. Relief surged through him. He climbed out of the car, waving his arms, shouting for help. The car slowed, then stopped. The driver rolled down the window. A woman, her face kind, her eyes warm. "Are you okay?" she asked. Alex nodded, tears streaming down his face. "My car died. Can you give me a ride?" She smiled. "Of course. Get in." Alex climbed into the passenger seat, gratitude overwhelming him. They drove in silence for a while, the road stretching endlessly ahead. After a few miles, the woman turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You know," she said, "you can't outrun yourself. No matter how far you drive, you'll find yourself waiting at the next stop." Alex froze. The words were the same, exactly the same, as the man's. He stared at her, fear rising in his chest. The woman smiled, her eyes pale and endless. "Some roads never end," she whispered. "Some choices can't be undone." Alex tried to open the door, but it was locked. The woman drove on, her smile growing wider, her eyes never leaving the road. They drove for hours, the world outside growing stranger, the darkness deeper. Alex lost track of time, of distance, of everything but the sound of the woman's voice, repeating the same words over and over. Finally, the car stopped. The woman turned to him, her face shifting, becoming the man's, then someone else's, then no one at all. "This is your stop," she said. Alex stumbled out of the car, finding himself back at the crossroads, the sign looming overhead. He realized then that he'd never left, that he was trapped, caught in a loop of his own making, doomed to repeat the same journey, the same choice, forever. The road stretched out before him, endless and empty. Alex started walking, the darkness swallowing him whole. And somewhere, in the distance, the roadside prophet waited for his next passenger. Let's move to our sixth story. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the narrow country road into a slick ribbon of black glass. Mark gripped the steering wheel, eyes straining to see through the fogged windshield. He was used to driving late at night. His job as a delivery driver meant he spent more time on the road than at home. But this stretch of highway, winding through the forgotten edge of town, always made him uneasy. The trees pressed close on either side, their branches clawing at the sky. And the world outside his headlights felt impossibly far away. He was thinking of his daughter, Emma, asleep at home with her mother. He missed her. missed the way she'd run to greet him when he finally stumbled through the door after a long shift. He promised himself he'd take a weekend off soon, just for her. He was lost in that thought when he saw her, a small figure standing by the roadside, drenched and shivering in the rain. At first, Mark thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But as he drew closer, he saw the unmistakable outline of a child. No more than 8 or 9, hair plastered to her face, arms wrapped around herself. She wore a faded pink raincoat, the kind his own daughter had begged for last Christmas. Mark's heart clenched. He slowed, rolling down the window. "Hey there," he called gently. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The girl looked up, her eyes wide and glassy. "I can't find my mom," she whispered, voice trembling. "She told me to wait, but she never came back." Mark's mind raced. It was late, the rain was relentless, and there was no sign of another car. He couldn't leave her there. He pulled over, hazard lights blinking in the darkness. "Come on, let's get you warm," he said, reaching across to unlock the passenger door. The girl hesitated, then climbed in, her small hands clutching the seatbelt as he buckled her in. "What's your name?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Lila," she replied, staring straight ahead. "Okay, Lila, I'm Mark. We'll find your mom, I promise. Do you know her phone number?" Lila shook her head, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. Mark handed her his phone, but she just stared at it, as if she'd never seen one before. He tried to reassure her, telling her about Emma, about how he was a dad too, about how no one would ever let her be alone in the rain if they could help it. Lila listened, silent, her eyes never leaving the road ahead. They drove for miles, Mark's mind spinning with questions. He called the local police, explained the situation, and agreed to meet an officer at the next gas station. He tried to keep the conversation light, asking Lila about her favorite TV shows, her school, her friends. She answered in short, clipped sentences, her voice barely above a whisper. As they neared the gas station, Mark glanced at her. "We're almost there, Lila. The police will help us find your mom." Lila's grip tightened on the seatbelt. "I'm scared," she whispered. Mark reached over, squeezing her hand. "It's okay. You're safe now." But as they pulled into the gas station, something strange happened. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the lot into darkness. Mark's phone lost signal, the radio filled with static. He looked at Lila, but she was gone. The passenger seat was empty, the door still locked. Panic surged through him. He jumped out, searching the lot, calling her name. There was no sign of her, no footprints in the mud, no trace she'd ever been there. The police arrived minutes later, but Mark's story sounded impossible. They searched the area, checked security cameras, but there was nothing. No girl in a pink raincoat, no evidence she'd ever existed. Mark was shaken, but he tried to move on. He told himself it was a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion and stress. But he couldn't shake the memory of Lila's eyes, the way she'd clung to the seatbelt, the way she'd whispered, "I'm scared." Days passed. Mark returned to his routine, but strange things began to happen. He'd find small, muddy footprints on his porch in the morning. His daughter's pink raincoat, lost months ago, appeared draped over the banister. Emma began waking from nightmares, crying about a girl outside her window, begging to be let in. Mark's wife grew worried. She told him to see a doctor, to take some time off, But Mark couldn't rest. He started researching, digging through old news reports, police records, anything he could find about missing children in the area. He found a story from 20 years ago. A girl named Lila, lost in the woods during a storm, never found. The photo in the article showed a child in a pink raincoat, her eyes wide and haunted. Mark's blood ran cold. He drove to the spot where he'd found Lila, searching the roadside for any sign, any clue. The trees seemed to close in around him, the air thick with the scent of rain and earth. He called her name, but only the wind answered. That night, Emma woke screaming. Mark rushed to her room, finding her curled in a ball, eyes squeezed shut. "She's here," Emma sobbed. "The girl in the raincoat. She wants to come inside." Mark held his daughter, heart pounding. He looked out the window, but the yard was empty, the rain falling in sheets. He tried to protect Emma, keeping her close, locking every door and window. But the footprints kept appearing, the nightmares growing worse. Mark began to feel watched, a cold presence lingering in the corners of his home. Desperate, he returned to the woods, searching for answers. He found the old foundation of a house, half buried in moss and leaves. In the center, a small, weathered gravestone. Lila, beloved daughter, lost but not forgotten. Mark knelt, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried to help." The air grew colder, the rain intensifying. Mark felt a hand on his shoulder, a small, cold hand. He turned, but there was no one there. He left flowers on the grave, promising to remember Lila, to tell her story, to make sure she was never forgotten. The nightmares stopped after that. The footprints faded, and Emma slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. But Mark never forgot the girl in the pink raincoat, her eyes wide with fear, her voice trembling with loneliness. He knew there were some roads you couldn't turn back from, some kindnesses that carried a price. He still drove that stretch of highway, always watching the roadside, always ready to stop. And sometimes, on rainy nights, he'd see a small figure standing in the downpour, waiting for someone to notice, someone to care. Mark would grip the wheel, heart heavy, and whisper a prayer for all the lost children, hoping that somewhere, somehow, they'd find their way home. Let's move to our 7th story. Derek had always believed that the road could wash away anything, regret, anger, even guilt. That's why he was driving, alone, through the endless dark, the highway stretching like a scar across the landscape. He'd left home in a storm of words and slammed doors, a duffel bag tossed into the back seat, his phone buzzing with messages he refused to answer. The world behind him was a mess of broken apologies and unfinished business. And the only thing that made sense was the steady hum of the engine and the promise of distance. It was just after 2:30 a.m. when Derek saw the hitchhiker. The interstate was empty, except for the occasional blur of a semi, and the rest stops were nothing but islands of fluorescent light in a sea of black. The hitchhiker stood at the edge of one such oasis, beneath a flickering lamp, thumb out, a battered backpack at his feet. He wore a faded green jacket, hood up, face obscured by shadow. Derek hesitated. Every warning he'd ever heard echoed in his mind. Don't pick up strangers, especially at night, especially when you're alone. But there was something about the figure's stillness, the way he seemed to be waiting for Derek in particular, that made him slow down and pull over. He rolled down the window, the cold night air rushing in. "Where you headed?" The hitchhiker stepped forward, his face coming into the light. He was younger than Derek expected, mid-20s maybe, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to reflect the world in shades of gray. "West," he said. "Anywhere you're going." Derek nodded, unlocking the door. "Hop in?" The stranger slid into the passenger seat with practiced ease, setting his backpack on the floor. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the engine idling and the distant hiss of the highway. "I'm Derek," he offered, glancing over. The hitchhiker smiled, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth. "Sam." Derek pulled back onto the interstate, merging into the darkness. The miles slipped by, the world reduced to the tunnel of their headlights and the rhythmic thump of expansion joints beneath the tires. They didn't speak for a long time. Derek was content with the silence, but Sam seemed to be studying him, his gaze lingering just a little too long. Finally, Sam broke the quiet. "You ever play games to stay awake?" he asked, voice soft but clear. Derek shook his head, eyes fixed on the road. "Not really. I usually just listen to music or talk radio." Sam nodded, as if considering this. "Let's play a game, something to pass the time." Derek glanced over, wary. "What kind of game?" "A simple one. We take turns asking questions. One question each, no lies allowed. If you lie, you lose." Derek almost laughed. "How would you know if I'm lying?" Sam's smile widened, but his eyes stayed cold. "I'll know." It was an odd challenge, but Derek was tired, and the road ahead seemed endless. "All right, you start." Sam leaned back, folding his arms. "Why are you running?" Derek felt a jolt, as if the stranger had reached into his chest. He hesitated, then answered, "I had a fight with my brother. Said some things I shouldn't have. Needed to get away before I made it worse." Sam nodded. "Your turn." Derek thought for a moment. "Why are you hitchhiking in the middle of nowhere?" Sam's gaze drifted to the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. "I'm looking for someone who owes me a debt." Derek frowned. "What kind of debt?" Sam shook his head. "One question at a time." The game continued, each question a little sharper than the last. "What's the worst thing you've ever done?" Sam asked. Derek swallowed, his hands tightening on the wheel. "I stole from my brother. Money he needed. I never told him." Sam's voice was almost gentle. "Do you regret it?" Every day. They drove on, the questions digging deeper, peeling back layers Derek had tried to bury. Sam's answers were always precise, but never revealing. He spoke of debts and promises, of people he'd met and places he'd been, but never about himself. As the hours passed, Derek felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. The world outside the car seemed to fade, replaced by the intensity of the game and the stranger beside him. At one point, Sam asked, "If you could erase one moment from your life, what would it be?" Derek didn't hesitate. "The night my parents died. I was supposed to pick them up from the airport, but I was out drinking with friends. Their cab crashed on the way home." Sam was silent for a long time. "You blame yourself?" Derek nodded, unable to speak. Sam's next question was softer. "Would you trade places with them if you could?" Derek's voice broke. Yes, in a heartbeat. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with things unsaid. As dawn approached, the landscape outside the windows began to change. The road narrowed, the trees pressed closer, and a thick fog rolled in, swallowing the world beyond the headlights. Sam leaned forward, his voice low. One last question, Derek. If you had the chance to start over, but someone else had to take your place, would you do it? Derek stared at him, heart pounding. What do you mean? Sam's eyes were endless, bottomless. Every choice has a cost. Sometimes to move forward, someone else has to be left behind. Derek shook his head, fear creeping in. I don't want anyone to suffer because of me. Sam smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That's not always your choice. Suddenly, the car's headlights flickered, then died. The engine sputtered and stalled, leaving them stranded in the fog. Derek's hand shook as he tried the ignition, but nothing happened. Sam reached into his backpack, pulling out a small, carved wooden token. He held it out to Derek, palm open. On one side, the word "Ode" was etched in neat, careful letters. Take it, Sam said. Derek hesitated, but something compelled him to reach out. The token was cold, almost icy, and as soon as he touched it, a wave of dizziness washed over him. The world shifted. The car, the fog, even Sam seemed to blur and dissolve. Derek blinked, and suddenly he was standing on the side of the road, the dawn just breaking on the horizon. His car was gone. The highway was empty. He looked down. The token was gone, but in his pocket he found his brother's watch, the one he'd stolen years ago and pawned for cash. It was whole, unworn, as if the past had been rewritten. Confused and shaken, Derek began to walk. The world felt different, lighter somehow, but unfamiliar. He reached for his phone, but it was dead. The only thing in his pocket was the watch and a folded piece of paper. He opened it. In neat handwriting, it read, "Every debt must be paid. Every game has a winner." As he walked, Derek saw a car approaching. He waved it down, desperate for help. The driver, a woman in her 40s, kind eyes, a tired smile, rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" she asked. Derek nodded, climbing in. As they drove, she glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You look lost," she said. "I am," Derek admitted. She smiled. "We all are sometimes." They drove in silence for a while, the landscape rolling by. Derek tried to piece together what had happened, but the memories were slippery, like a dream fading with the morning light. Eventually, they reached a small town. The woman dropped him off at a diner, pressing a few dollars into his hand. "Get yourself some breakfast," she said. "And remember, sometimes the only way out is through." Derek thanked her, stepping into the warmth of the diner. He sat by the window, watching the world wake up, and tried to make sense of the night. He never saw Sam again, but sometimes, when he looked in the mirror, he'd catch a glimpse of those gray eyes, watching, waiting. Years passed. Derek rebuilt his life, reconnected with his brother, found steady work, made peace with the past. But the memory of the game lingered, a reminder that every choice comes with a price. Late at night, when the road called to him, Derek would sometimes drive out to the old highway, searching for answers. And every so often, he'd see a figure standing by the roadside, thumb out, waiting for a ride. He never stopped. He never played the game again. But he knew, deep down, that the stranger's game was never really over. It just waited for the next lost soul, the next desperate driver, the next debt to be paid. And somewhere, out there on the endless road, Sam was still waiting, token in hand, ready to ask the only question that mattered. Would you trade places if you could? For some, the answer was yes. For others, the game was just beginning. Let's move to our 8th story. Route 19 was the kind of road that never made it onto tourist maps. It cut through the forgotten heart of the state, bordered by dense pine forests and old, abandoned farmhouses sinking into the earth. Locals avoided it after dark, muttering about accidents and disappearances. But for out-of-towners, it was just a shortcut. One that promised to shave 30 minutes off the drive between two nowhere towns. On a chilly November night, Amelia found herself on Route 19 for the first time. She was behind schedule, her phone's GPS chirping out directions as she sped through the darkness. The road was empty, the only light coming from her headlights and the occasional glint of animal eyes in the trees. She was tired, hungry, and eager to reach her motel before midnight. The first sign that something was wrong came as she rounded a sharp bend. A shape flashed in her headlights, a figure standing at the edge of the road, arm raised, thumb out. Amelia's heart jumped. She braked hard, tires skidding on the damp asphalt, and came to a stop a few yards ahead. She looked in the rearview mirror. The hitchhiker was still there, unmoving, silhouetted against the trees. He wore an old-fashioned coat, the kind her grandfather had worn in faded family photos, and a battered fedora pulled low over his face. Amelia hesitated. Everything her parents had warned her about picking up strangers echoed in her mind. But the night was cold, and the man looked desperate. Against her better judgment, she reversed and rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" she called. The man nodded once, his movement stiff. As he approached, Amelia caught a glimpse of his face, pale, gaunt, with deep-set eyes that seemed to swallow the light. He slid into the passenger seat without a word, clutching a worn leather satchel. "Where to?" Amelia asked, forcing a smile. He spoke quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just up ahead. I'll tell you when." They drove in silence. The man stared straight ahead, hands folded on his lap. Amelia tried to make conversation, but he ignored her questions, answering only with nods or shakes of his head. The air in the car grew cold, and a faint scent of old tobacco and damp earth filled the space. After 10 minutes, the man spoke. "Turn left at the next fork." Amelia obeyed, the car bumping onto a narrower, rougher road. The trees pressed closer, their branches scraping the roof. The headlights illuminated only a few feet ahead, the rest swallowed by darkness. Suddenly, the man's hand shot out, gripping Amelia's arm. She flinched, but he only pointed ahead. "Stop here." Amelia braked, heart pounding. The man opened the door and stepped out, pausing to look back at her. "Thank you," he said softly. "Be careful on this road. Not everyone who travels it comes back." He closed the door and vanished into the trees, swallowed by the night. Shaken, Amelia drove up, eager to leave Route 19 behind. But as she rounded the next bend, her headlights caught something that made her blood run cold. A car, crumpled against a tree, its hood wrapped around the trunk. Smoke rose from the engine, and a woman stood beside it, waving frantically. Amelia pulled over and rushed to help. The woman was in shock, her face streaked with tears and blood. "I didn't see him," she sobbed. "He just appeared in the middle of the road. I swerved and—" Amelia glanced at the spot the woman pointed to, but there was nothing there. Just the empty road and the whispering trees. She called 911, staying with the woman until help arrived. The paramedics loaded the woman into the ambulance, and the police took Amelia's statement. As they worked, one of the officers, a grizzled man with tired eyes, pulled Amelia aside. "You saw him, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Amelia hesitated, then nodded. The officer sighed. "You're not the first. Every year someone reports picking up a hitchhiker on this road. Always the same description. Always vanishes before the next accident." Amelia shivered. "Who is he?" The officer shook his head. "No one knows. Some say he's the ghost of a man killed here decades ago. Others say he's a warning, trying to keep people from ending up like him." Amelia left Route 19 that night, with the officer's words echoing in her mind. She made it to her motel, but sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the hitchhiker's pale face, heard his warning. Days passed, but Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her off that road. Her dreams were filled with images of twisted metal, flickering headlights, and the endless, empty forest. She started seeing the hitchhiker everywhere. In the reflection of shop windows, in the shadows at the edge of her vision, in the faces of strangers on the street. She tried to move on, but the sense of unease grew. Her friends noticed her jumpiness, her reluctance to drive at night. She stopped taking shortcuts, sticking to well-lit highways and busy streets. But the memory of Route 19 lingered, a shadow she couldn't escape. One evening, weeks later, Amelia received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was faint, distorted by static. "Be careful on that road," it whispered. "Not everyone comes back." The line went dead. Amelia stared at her phone, heart racing. She tried to trace the call, but there was no record of it. No number, no voicemail, nothing. That night, she dreamed of Route 19. She was driving alone, the forest pressing in, the road twisting endlessly ahead. The hitchhiker stood by the roadside, arm raised, thumb out. She stopped, and he climbed into the car, his eyes hollow and endless. "Not everyone who travels this road comes back," he whispered. Amelia woke in a cold sweat, the words echoing in her mind. The next day, she decided to face her fear. She drove back to Route 19, determined to prove to herself that it was just a road, just a bad memory. The sun was shining, the trees less menacing in the daylight. She drove slowly, scanning the roadside for any sign of the hitchhiker. As she neared the spot where she'd picked him up, her radio crackled to life, filling the car with static. She tried to change the station, but the noise only grew louder. Suddenly, the car stalled, engine dying with a shudder. Amelia sat in stunned silence, heart pounding. She reached for her phone, but it was dead. The world outside was eerily quiet, the only sound the wind in the trees. She got out, looking around. The road was empty, the forest still. She walked to the edge of the trees, calling out, but there was no answer. As she turned to head back to the car, she saw him, the hitchhiker, standing in the shadows, watching her with those hollow eyes. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice trembling. He stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. I warned you, he said softly. Some roads remember. Amelia backed away, fear rising. What do you want? The hitchhiker's expression was mournful. To go home. But I can't. Not until someone takes my place. Amelia froze, realization dawning. She turned to run, but the world seemed to shift around her. The trees closed in, the road vanished, and she was lost in the darkness. When she opened her eyes, she was standing by the roadside, the cold seeping into her bones. A car approached, headlights bright in the night. She raised her arm, thumb out, hoping, praying that someone would stop. The driver slowed, rolling down the window. Need a ride? He asked. Amelia nodded, climbing into the passenger seat. She tried to speak, to warn him, but the words wouldn't come. She stared straight ahead, hands folded in her lap, as the car sped off into the night. Back on Route 19, the cycle continued. The phantom hitchhiker waited for the next traveler, the next chance to go home. And Amelia, lost in the endless loop, became just another shadow on the forgotten road. A warning to those who dared to take the shortcut. A reminder that not every passenger is what they seem, and not every road leads back to where you started. Let's move to our 9th story. Evelyn had always believed in doing the right thing, even when it was inconvenient. She was the sort of person who stopped to help at accidents, who carried jumper cables in her trunk, who would rather be late than ignore someone in need. Her friends teased her for it, but she took pride in being a good Samaritan. It was an identity she wore like armor, until the night she learned that some acts of kindness come with a price. It was a cold autumn evening, the kind where the air feels brittle and the sky hangs low and gray. Evelyn was driving home from her mother's house, her mind wandering as she navigated the winding back roads that cut through the countryside. The leaves had already turned, and the world outside her headlights was a blur of red and gold. She was halfway home when she saw the car, a battered sedan, hazards blinking, pulled to the side of the road just past a blind curve. As she slowed, she saw a man standing beside it, waving frantically. He looked desperate, his jacket too thin for the cold, his breath visible in the air. Evelyn pulled over, rolling down her window. "Are you all right?" The man nodded, relief flooding his face. "My car died. I've been out here for hours. No one else stopped." "Do you need a lift?" Evelyn asked, already unlocking the doors. He slid into the passenger seat, shivering. "Thank you. I just need to get to the next town. My phone's dead, and I can't reach anyone." Evelyn smiled reassuringly. "No problem. I'm headed that way." As they drove, the man introduced himself as Daniel. He was polite, grateful, and seemed genuinely shaken by his ordeal. They chatted about the weather, the bad luck of car trouble, and how rare it was to find someone willing to help a stranger. But as the miles passed, Evelyn started to notice odd things. Daniel's hands shook, not just from cold, but from something deeper. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror, as if expecting to see someone following. And every now and then, he would mutter under his breath. Words Evelyn couldn't quite catch, but that sounded like apologies. At the edge of the next town, Daniel asked Evelyn to pull over by a small, run-down motel. He thanked her again, fumbling with the door handle. Before he got out, he pressed something into her hand. A small, intricately carved wooden charm, cool and heavy. "For your kindness," he said, voice trembling. "Keep it with you. It's important." Evelyn tried to refuse, but Daniel insisted. "Please, I can't take it with me." He hurried into the shadows, leaving Evelyn alone with the strange gift. She examined it, a little figure, almost like a chess piece, with symbols etched into its sides. She shrugged, slipped it into her purse, and drove home. That night, Evelyn dreamed of running. Bare feet on cold earth, branches clawing at her skin, something unseen chasing her through endless woods. She woke in a sweat, heart pounding, the charm still clutched in her hand. The next day, odd things began to happen. Her phone glitched, calls dropping and texts failing to send. She found muddy footprints on her porch, though she lived alone. At work, she caught glimpses of a figure in the corner of her eye. A man in a thin jacket, watching her from across the parking lot. Each time she turned, he vanished. Evelyn tried to dismiss it all as stress, but the incidents grew stranger. Her dreams became more vivid, filled with whispers and warnings. She started finding objects in her home that didn't belong to her. A broken watch, a faded photograph of a family she didn't recognize, a set of old car keys stained with rust. The charm felt heavier each day, its symbols seeming to shift when she wasn't looking. Desperate, Evelyn tried to track down Daniel. She called the motel, but they had no record of him. She drove back to the spot where she'd picked him up, but the sedan was gone, no sign it had ever been there. She turned to the internet, searching for answers. On a late-night forum, she found stories eerily similar to hers. Accounts of people who'd helped strangers on lonely roads, only to be left with strange tokens and a string of bad luck. The stories all ended the same way. The only way to break the curse was to pass the charm on to someone else. To repeat the act of kindness and hope the burden would finally lift. Evelyn was horrified. She didn't want to trap someone else, but the nightmares were getting worse. She stopped sleeping, stopped answering her phone, stopped leaving the house after dark. One night, as she sat awake in her living room, she heard a knock at the door. Heart pounding, she peered through the peephole. A woman stood on the porch, drenched and shivering, her car visible in the driveway, hazards blinking. "Please," the woman called, voice raw with desperation. "My car broke down. I just need to use your phone." Evelyn hesitated, the charm burning in her pocket. She remembered Daniel's words, the stories she'd read, the weight of her own fear. She opened the door, forcing a smile. "Come in," she said, her voice barely steady. As the woman stepped inside, Evelyn pressed the charm into her hand. "For your kindness," she whispered, echoing Daniel's words. The woman looked confused, but Evelyn insisted. "Please, it's important." After the woman left, Evelyn felt the air lighten, the shadows recede. That night, she slept without dreams for the first time in weeks. But she knew the curse wasn't gone, just passed on, waiting for the next Good Samaritan to stop on a lonely road, to help a stranger, to accept a gift they'd never asked for. Evelyn still helps people, but she's more cautious now. She knows that some acts of kindness come with a price, and that some roads are better left untraveled. And sometimes, late at night, she'll see a car pulled over on the shoulder, hazards blinking, a figure waving in the darkness. She keeps driving, the memory of the charm heavy in her mind, and whispers a silent warning to whoever stops next. Be careful who you help. Some debts can never be repaid. Let's move to our 10th story. The rain was relentless, hammering the windshield in sheets and turning the world outside into a blur of red taillights and neon reflections. Jake gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as he navigated the slick city streets. He was running late, again. His phone buzzed with a new message, but he ignored it, focusing instead on the GPS's insistent voice guiding him toward the highway. He needed to get out of town, fast. Jake had always been good at reading people, at spotting trouble before it found him. But tonight, his instincts were dulled by exhaustion and fear. He'd made a mistake, a big one, and now there were people looking for him, people who didn't believe in second chances. The duffel bag in his trunk, packed hastily with cash and a few clothes, was both his ticket to freedom and a target on his back. He was almost to the on-ramp when he saw her. A woman in a dark raincoat standing beneath a flickering street lamp, thumb out, face hidden by shadows. She looked out of place, too calm for the storm, too still for the city's chaos. Jake hesitated. Every warning he'd ever heard about picking up hitchhikers echoed in his mind. But something about her, maybe the way she stood, unafraid, made him slow down and roll down the window. "Need a ride?" he called. She nodded, pulling the hood lower over her face. "If you're headed north." Jake unlocked the doors. "Hop in." She slid into the passenger seat, water pooling at her feet. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the rain drumming on the roof and the low hum of the engine. "I'm Jake," he offered, glancing over. She hesitated, then replied, "Call me Harper." Jake pulled onto the highway, merging with the thin stream of late-night traffic. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by the endless black ribbon of road and the occasional flash of lightning on the horizon. They drove in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Jake kept glancing at Harper, trying to read her expression, but her face was turned toward the window, features obscured by the shifting light. He wondered what she was running from, what secrets she carried in that battered backpack at her feet. Finally, Harper broke the silence. "You always pick up strangers?" Jake shrugged. "Not usually, but tonight felt different." She smiled, just a flicker. "You trust too easily." Jake laughed, the sound brittle. "Not anymore." They lapsed back into silence, the tension in the car thickening with every mile. Jake's mind raced, replaying the events of the past week, the deal gone wrong, the threats, the narrow escape. He wondered if Harper could sense his fear, if she knew he was lying about where he was headed. After an hour, Harper spoke again. "You got a destination?" Jake hesitated. "Just driving. Figured I'd see where the road takes me." She nodded, as if she'd expected that. "Me too." They stopped at a gas station on the edge of a small town. Jake filled the tank while Harper disappeared inside, returning a few minutes later with 2 coffees and a bag of chips. They sat in the car, sipping the bitter coffee, watching the rain. "You ever feel like you're being watched?" Harper asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake stiffened. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, eyes scanning the parking lot. "Just a feeling." Jake followed her gaze, but the lot was empty. Still, he couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over him. Back on the highway, the conversation grew more guarded. Each question a test, each answer carefully measured. Jake asked Harper where she was from, but she deflected, asking about his family instead. He lied, telling her he was an only child, that his parents were gone. She nodded, as if she understood the need for secrets. As the night wore on, the storm intensified. The wipers struggled to keep up, and visibility dropped to a few feet. Jake's nerves were frayed, every shadow on the roadside a potential threat. Suddenly, Harper sat up straighter, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. "We're being followed," she said quietly. Jake glanced in the mirror. At first, he saw nothing. Then, in the distance, a pair of headlights appeared, growing larger with every mile. "Friends of yours?" Harper asked, her tone unreadable. Jake shook his head, heart pounding. "Not unless you count people who want me dead." Harper smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "Maybe we have more in common than I thought." Jake floored the accelerator, the car surging forward. The headlights behind them matched his speed, closing the distance. Harper reached into her backpack, pulling out a small pistol. Jake stared, shocked. "You always travel armed?" he asked. Harper's eyes were hard. "Only when I have to." The chase lasted for miles, the car behind them weaving through traffic, closing in. Jake took a sharp exit, tires screeching on the wet pavement. The pursuing car followed, headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. At the edge of another small town, Jake pulled into an alley, killing the lights. Harper rolled down her window, gun at the ready. The car behind them slowed, then sped past, disappearing into the night. They sat in silence, adrenaline buzzing in their veins. "Who are you?" Jake finally asked, voice shaking. Harper looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Someone who knows what it's like to be hunted." Jake nodded, understanding more than he wanted to admit. They decided to stick together, at least until morning. They drove through the night, sharing stories in fragments, never the whole truth, but enough to build a fragile trust. Jake learned that Harper had been on the run for years, that she'd crossed paths with dangerous people, that she'd survived by trusting no one. As dawn broke, they reached a motel on the outskirts of a forgotten town. Harper insisted on checking in under a false name, paying in cash. They took separate rooms, agreeing to meet for breakfast. Jake lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night's events. He wondered if he could trust Harper, if she was really on his side. He thought about the money in his trunk, the people hunting him, the choices he'd made. At breakfast, Harper was already waiting, sipping coffee and scanning the room. She slid a newspaper across the table. The headline made Jake's blood run cold. "Armed robbery suspect at large, considered dangerous." Below the headline was a grainy photo of Jake, taken from a security camera. Harper raised an eyebrow. "You want to tell me what really happened?" Jake hesitated, then told her everything. The botched robbery, the betrayal by his partner, the money in the trunk. Harper listened, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she leaned in. "We can help each other, but you have to trust me." Jake nodded, desperation overriding caution. They made a plan. Harper would drive. Jake would keep watch. They'd head for the border, lay low until things cooled off. For the first time in days, Jake felt a glimmer of hope. But as they loaded their bags into the car, Jake noticed something strange. Harper's backpack was heavier than before, and she kept glancing at him, her eyes calculating. They drove in silence, tension mounting. At a rest stop, Harper excused herself, taking her backpack with her. Jake waited, nerves on edge. When she returned, she was pale, her hands shaking. "We need to go," she said urgently. As they pulled onto the highway, sirens wailed in the distance. Harper floored the accelerator, weaving through traffic. "What did you do?" Jake demanded. Harper's voice was flat. "I made a call. Told them where to find your partner. We're clear, for now." Jake stared at her, realization dawning. "You set me up." Harper didn't deny it. "I did what I had to. You're not the only one with enemies." Jake's anger flared, but before he could react, Harper pulled off the highway, stopping the car on a deserted stretch of road. "This is where we part ways," she said, her voice cold. "Take the money. Disappear. Don't look for me." Jake got out, the duffel bag heavy in his hands. Harper drove off, leaving him alone on the roadside. He watched the car disappear, the rain swallowing its taillights. He knew he'd been double-crossed, but he also knew he'd done the same in her position. Jake started walking, the money his only companion. He didn't know where he was headed, but he knew one thing. On the road, trust was a currency more valuable than gold, and twice as dangerous. And somewhere, out there in the rain, Harper was driving into her own storm, her own secrets trailing behind her like ghosts. On the highway, two strangers had crossed paths, each running from their past, each willing to betray the other to survive. In the end, the road was the only winner, swallowing their secrets and carrying them onward, alone. Let's move to our 11th and final story. No one really knows when the legend of the endless ride began. Some say it's as old as the highways themselves, whispered by truckers in late-night diners and scribbled in the margins of old road maps. Others believe it's a cautionary tale, a warning to those who trust too easily or wander too far from the familiar. But for those who have lived it, the story is more than a myth. It's a memory, a scar, a secret that never quite lets go. Eli was a drifter by nature. He'd spent most of his adult life moving from town to town, never staying long enough to put down roots. The road was his home, the rumble of engines and the scent of gasoline his only constants. He'd hitchhiked across the country more times than he could count, collecting stories and scars in equal measure. He told himself he liked the freedom, the unpredictability, the sense that anything could happen. But deep down, Eli knew he was running. From memories, from mistakes, from the version of himself he'd left behind somewhere on a forgotten stretch of asphalt. On the night the story begins, Eli found himself on the outskirts of a dying town, the last bus long gone, and the sky heavy with the promise of rain. He stuck out his thumb, hoping for a miracle or at least a warm seat. The highway was empty, save for the occasional flash of headlights in the distance. Just as he was about to give up, a car appeared. A black sedan, old but well kept, gliding silently to a stop beside him. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a tired smile, leaned over and rolled down the window. "Need a lift?" he asked. Eli hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He climbed in, grateful for the warmth and the company. The driver introduced himself as Tom. He spoke with a gentle drawl, the kind that made you think of summer nights and porch swings. He didn't ask many questions, content to let the silence settle between them like an old friend. They drove for miles, the road unspooling beneath them in a ribbon of silver and shadow. Eli watched the landscape blur past. Fields, forests, the occasional flicker of distant lights. He felt himself relax, lulled by the steady hum of the engine and the soft patter of rain on the roof. After a while, Tom broke the silence. "You ever feel like you're going in circles?" he asked, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Eli laughed, the sound brittle. "All the time." Tom nodded, as if he understood. "Sometimes it feels like no matter how far you go, you end up right back where you started." Eli didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. As the hours passed, Eli began to notice strange things. The radio played the same song on repeat, a mournful ballad about lost love and empty roads. The mile markers seemed to repeat, the numbers blurring together in the rain. At one point, Eli glanced at the dashboard clock and realized it hadn't changed since they'd left town. He tried to shake off the unease, telling himself he was just tired, that the road had a way of playing tricks on your mind. But the feeling only grew stronger, a knot of dread tightening in his chest. They passed a gas station, a run-down shack with a flickering neon sign. Eli was sure they'd already passed it once before, but Tom didn't seem to notice. He just kept driving, his hand steady on the wheel. "Where are we headed?" Eli asked, trying to keep his voice light. Tom smiled, but there was something sad in his eyes. "Wherever the road takes us." As the night deepened, the car began to fill with other hitchhikers. First, a young woman with haunted eyes and a suitcase full of letters. Then, an old man in a threadbare coat, his hands trembling as he clutched a faded photograph. Each one climbed in without a word, settling into the back seat with the weary resignation of those who have traveled too far for too long. Eli tried to make conversation, but the others barely responded. They stared out the windows, lost in their own thoughts, their faces illuminated by the passing headlights. He felt the weight of their silence pressing in, suffocating. He wanted to ask Tom to stop, to let him out. But the words caught in his throat. It was the young woman who finally spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We're not getting out, are we?" Tom didn't answer. He just kept driving, his eyes fixed on the endless road ahead. Eli's heart pounded. He reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The windows were fogged, the outside world reduced to a blur of rain and shadow. He looked at the others, searching for answers, but they only shook their heads. "We've all tried," the old man said, his voice hollow. "There's no way out." As the hours dragged on, Eli's memories began to blur. He saw flashes of his past, childhood summers, lost loves, mistakes he wished he could undo. The car seemed to feed on his regrets, each memory sharper and more painful than the last. He realized, with a jolt of terror, that he couldn't remember where he was going or why he'd left in the first place. The road stretched on, endless and unchanging, a loop with no beginning and no end. He tried to fight it, to hold on to something real. But the memories slipped through his fingers like sand. At some point, Eli fell asleep. When he woke, the car was empty. Tom was gone, the other passengers vanished. He was alone, the engine silent, the world outside shrouded in mist. He stumbled out of the car, calling for help, but his voice was swallowed by the fog. He wandered for what felt like hours, the landscape shifting and changing around him. Fields becoming forests, forests becoming empty streets. Finally, he found himself back on the highway, thumb out, waiting for a ride. A car appeared, a black sedan, old but well kept, gliding silently to a stop beside him. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a tired smile, leaned over and rolled down the window. "Need a lift?" he asked. Eli hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He climbed in, grateful for the warmth and the company. Eli realized, with a sickening certainty, that he was trapped in a loop, a never-ending ride, doomed to repeat the same journey over and over. He saw the faces of the other passengers in his dreams, heard their voices whispering in the darkness. He tried everything to break the cycle, jumping from the car, refusing to get in, screaming for help. But each time, he found himself back on the roadside, thumb out, waiting for the next ride. He watched the world change around him, towns rising and falling, roads crumbling and being rebuilt. But the car was always there, always waiting, always ready to take him on another endless journey. Over time, Eli learned to recognize the signs, the repeating mile markers, the unchanging clock, the faces of the other passengers. He tried to warn others, to tell them not to get in, but his words were lost in the wind. He watched as new hitchhikers joined the ride, each one carrying their own regrets, their own secrets. Some accepted their fate, sinking into the silence. Others fought, raging against the loop, but none ever escaped. Eli began to wonder if the road was a punishment, a purgatory for those who had lost their way. He thought of the mistakes he'd made, the people he'd hurt, the chances he'd squandered. He wondered if he would ever find redemption, or if he was doomed to ride forever. One night, as the rain fell in sheets and the world outside was swallowed by darkness, Eli saw a figure standing by the roadside. A young man, no older than he'd been when he first started hitchhiking. The man looked lost, scared, desperate for a way out. Eli rolled down the window, feeling the weight of the years pressing down on him. "Need a lift?" he asked, his voice trembling. The man hesitated, then nodded. He climbed in, grateful for the warmth and the company. As they drove, Eli told him the story, the truth about the endless ride, the loop that never ends, the regrets that haunt every mile. The man listened, eyes wide with fear and understanding. When they reached the fork in the road, Eli stopped the car. "You have a choice," he said. "You can keep going, or you can get out and try to find your own way." The man looked at him, tears in his eyes. "What would you do?" Eli smiled, a sad, weary smile. "I'd get out. I'd take my chances. Because sometimes the only way to break the cycle is to stop running and face what you're afraid of." The man nodded, opening the door and stepping out into the night. Eli watched him go, hope flickering in his chest for the first time in years. If you ever find yourself on a lonely road, thumb out, waiting for a ride, remember Eli's story? Not every journey is what it seems. Not every ride will take you where you want to go. Sometimes, the hardest thing is to stop running, to face your regrets, to choose a different path. The road can be a place of freedom, but it can also be a trap. Trust your instincts. Listen to your fears, and never, ever get in a car if something feels wrong. If this story sent chills down your spine, make sure you subscribe to Verified Fears for more true horror stories that will keep you up at night. Share your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever had a ride you wish you could forget? And remember, the scariest journeys are the ones we take alone. Stay safe, trust yourself, and don't let your next ride be your last.